Welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday Night Smite podcast, episode 26. Today is the episode where we discuss the Smite World Championship, where we do a recap of everything that happened there. And yeah, obviously, I am not too happy. Sabo is very happy.
Oh, I'm giddy. I'm jumping in my seat right now.
Still haven't stopped after like 2 weeks now.
Hey, you got 6 months. I get 2 weeks to celebrate, all right? It's only been 2 weeks for me. You've had the better part of 2 years. So, excuse me if I get 2 weeks, okay?
No, I'm not complaining, Z. I'm just saying, if you haven't stopped jumping after 2 weeks, then you're celebrating too much.
Well, anyway. That and the documentary eUnited was filming during their time at Hi-Res Expo just came out, and I'll get to relive it all over again.
Yeah,
and
I'm sure that's.
I've watched. Yeah, I've watched the final set about 2 or 3 times now.
Well, I've only gone through it once, so there's that. And yeah, I'm sure I'm gonna have great fun rewatching, watching the documentary as well. I really need to be reminded of my week that I had during the World Championship, because I had a shitty fucking week, man.
Well, it's the documentary is more of a, like I said, I'm only halfway through it right now. As we was talking before we started recording, it's not a whole lot of gloating. It's about the work and the effort they put in to every game. You really get a good behind the scenes look at what the preparations are before a big game like the Obey set for eUnited. It's really interesting to watch.
Yeah, well, you see, I'm sure it's going to be interesting, but you just need to understand how bad my week actually was, the week of the World Championship. Because as you know, I've told you, and I've not told any viewers, right, that we had a power outage on Wednesday, which was basically the start of my week, because who cares about Monday and Tuesday? Then power was down for 10 hours, right? And I was just sitting in our house, and it was cold as hell because we don't have heating when the power's out. And I had nothing to do because there's no power. I basically just used every electronic device that I had that runs on the battery until the battery was out. Then, what do? And then afterwards, right, on that day, I got sick. And so I was sick for the entirety of the rest of the Smite World Championship. And obviously EU lost, so terrible week for me. Very disappointing.
Yeah. The day after the Smite World Championships was over with, I got sick and came down with the stomach flu, and so that's why we didn't record last week. Here we are this week.
And now we didn't record yesterday because I had internet outages, because it was, again, a storm, which also knocked out the power 2 weeks ago, right? So we have a lot of storms right now in Switzerland. Anyway, let's get into the topic at hand, which is obviously the Smite World Championship. First thing we want to discuss, we already recorded this thing yesterday, so we're just going to repeat everything we said, basically. The international teams are the first sort of topic we're going to touch on, and how they did at the World Championship. So how did they do?
Well, things played out exactly how we thought they would. The 2 teams that made it, onto Friday and into the quarterfinals are exactly the 2 teams we thought was going to make it. We didn't really have a lot of faith in the Southeast Asia team, Entity, or the Oceania team, Scylla. Turns out we were right, because they were both swept by the other 2 international teams on Thursday before the quarterfinals even started. It was the interesting thing was about that Thursday was that how dominant Black Dragons and Nocturne Gaming actually looked against these other international teams. Both sets were neither entertaining or even close.
Yeah, and I think you can especially say that about the one between Nocturnes and Scylla. Right, the other had some entertainment value, I thought. Like, it looked like Entity was in the game for a bit longer than Scylla was. But yeah, in the end, obviously both sets went 2-0 in favor of the South Americans or Latin
Yeah,
Americans.
the Middle and South Americans, so Central and South Americans. So yeah, so Latin and Brazil both took down Oceania, which is Australia, and Southeast Asia, which is places like South Korea and China and that area of the world, respectively.
Yeah.
I give Southeast Asia a little bit of a pass against Black Dragons because, like you said, it was a little bit more competitive. But we got to remember, 6 months ago, this region wasn't even around. It didn't even have a pro league scene. It was more than just invitationals, week by week tournaments where you played, try to win some money, and that was it. So they're just now starting to get organized in that region. Oceania, I think, was the bigger disappointment, and especially Scylla Esports. They came in having had representatives at all the previous Smite World Championships. With Avant Garde in season 1, and then the same team but under different names in the next 2 seasons, which was LG Direwolves, and that was Kiki Ome and Richard Castle and the boys. And we expected more of them out of their trip, finally getting a new team, even though the Hunter was the same from last year. We still got basically a brand new team because LG Dire was disbanded and most of them quit playing professional Smite. But again, it was really disappointing. Nocturnes, Cliz, no, it wasn't Cliz. What's the mid Nox Q? Yeah, he
Nox
really
Q.
shined. Yeah, he really shined in the set, and he and Latinum really. The rest of Nocturnes really it made Scylla look like they were gold players going up against diamond players. Like, it was not even funny to watch.
Yeah, as I said already, the way I described it was they made like the match between them made Nocturnes look like they weren't a LATAM team, but were instead an NA or EU team. That's how dominant they were able to beat Scylla Esports. Right, because usually that type of domination is something you expect to see whenever an NA or EU team is playing an international one, not necessarily between the international ones. But that's really what it looked like in this example.
I think it's clear now that there's a big gap between the top of the international scene and the bottom of the international scene, or the mid of the international scene.
Yeah, sure. I think I'm less worried about Southeast Asia, right? Because they're a new region, as you said, and I think they're also going to be expanding the region going into season 5, right? Not just including the southeast of Asia, but also other parts of it, from what I know, or at least that's something I've heard that they're going to try and do. OCE, on the other hand, is an established region and has been one for 3 seasons now, right? And they've never done anything internationally. I don't think they've even gotten a single win at the Smite World Championship. So they're the region that I'm not necessarily worried about, that I'm just disappointed by, because they've never put anything together that has been in any way, shape, or form impressive. And somehow, they just always manage to disappoint my expectations, even though they're practically at 0 by now. Which is something I don't understand either.
Well, we talked about a possibility yesterday before we had issues about maybe Hi-Rez looking at their international scene and doing something with it that would ensure that we have the best international teams at the LAN events like Hi-Rez Expo and the Smite World Championships, and not these teams that really have no business being on the stage against these teams like Rival and eUnited and Energy. We discussed many possibilities, from maybe a second super regionals before Worlds to, weed out some of the international competition and maybe get a couple more SPL teams a second chance at making it to the Worlds. I brought up the maybe doing it like Europe does in football, where you get the league play, and then the champion of that league is invited to the UEFA Champions League, and that
Yeah, well,
determines.
it's not just the champions, right? You get multiple spots if you're a big league. I think the Premier League, which is
Yeah,
the English one, has
only
like
the
5 spots.
only the best of the best get invited to the UEFA Champions League,
Yeah,
right? That something that I think Hi-Rez could maybe bring into Smite, where you know split the international scene up into two splits. Split one, you have the league play where Latinum's only playing Latinum, Brazil's only playing Brazil, and so on and so forth. And then you take the two best teams out of each region, and then you put them in a Champions League, an international Champions League, where all of the other international regions are represented, and we find out who the top of the international scene is going into Worlds, and we find out exactly who actually deserves to be there, who's the best teams from around the world, because Scylla and Entity, Scylla's main competition in Australia or in the Oceania scene was Legacy Esports. They took Scylla to all 5 games before eventually losing at basically the Oceania regionals, and you take those two teams and you put them in the same in a split, a complete split against maybe against teams like Entity and Black Dragons and Nocturnes and whoever else was second in their leagues, and you find out you have them play each other, and you find out who's the best the winner of or maybe the top 2 teams of the Champions League go straight into the SWC, while the other maybe 3rd and 4th place team go into that second super regionals, where they have to face off against teams from maybe last year's example, maybe they'll face off against Dignitas and Noble, or maybe somebody who didn't make it to Worlds out of the first original super regional. So we found out they just give them a chance, and you give everybody a chance and make it equal.
yeah. That was basically my main idea, right? Was creating an international qualifier LAN where they would play against the NA and EU teams as well as each other, of course. And then you just have the teams advance that are best out of all of those, right? Because I think with the level of play that Nocturne showed, I think they could have the potential to actually beat some of the teams there, right? And if that's the improvement that we're seeing, then that could become a possibility as well. Having an international league just between the international teams, a sort of Champions League I described, the issue there is obviously going to be ping, so it would have to be LAN-based. And that's why I think I wouldn't necessarily support a league, but I would definitely support a tournament circuit where they play against each other, right? Where you just have multiple LAN events in different places on the world, and they play each other there.
Maybe we see something like that in the future as Smite gets bigger and more money gets involved. But constant travel, booking stadiums, and having not travel meaning airplane tickets, hotel rooms, and that's not just for the players and the teams, but also the representatives of the organization, high-res employees that will oversee the games, cameramen, casters, all that stuff. That gets pretty expensive. So maybe in the future, when there's more money involved, we could see something like that. But for right now, I think you have to pretty much deal with the ping as you get it, and hopefully it gets better as time goes on. But like I said, it's a lot of money to invest right now.
Yeah, certainly. Right. I think the easiest way to do it would be to just have them in like smaller arenas within the regions themselves, right? You could have a LAN for each of the regions that is represented. So you would have one in Brazil, one somewhere else in Latin America, one in Australia and one in somewhere in Southeast Asia, right? And then you just invite international teams as well. But yeah, main topic sort of is that within the international teams didn't perform all too well at this year's Smite World Championship. What we did, of course, see was the initial matchups that they played against NA and EU teams, where all of them just lost. And then we saw two more matchups. Obviously, Nocturnes went up against Rival, and Black Dragons went up against eUnited. Black Dragons didn't really stand a chance in their set, right? They got taken out pretty quickly in two pretty quick games.
That was eUnited just working out some of the nerves. Prior to this event, only Polar Bear Mike and Benji have been on the world stage. So the other three, it was a good warm-up set for them, and they had to get some of the nerves out of their system and just be able to play on that stage. That's pretty much what the set boiled down to. eUnited handled that set fairly easily. So yeah.
Yeah, that was... They looked very good in that set already, right? And obviously the form then proved itself going later into the tournament. On the other side, as I said, we had Rival against Nocturnes. There we had a very dominant game one from Rival. Then in game two, they brought out a bit of jank picks, and it ended up with them having to really fight for that second win.
Yeah, credit where Nocturnes is due. Credit to Nocturnes is due here because, coming off that game one into that game two, as disappointing performance as game one they had in game one, you could see some of the players kind of in their cameras down on themselves, but they played up to it, and the Toth ADC, the Hachiman mid from Rival were jank picks, and ultimately the Toth ADC is what did a lot of the damage to Rival's chance or Rival's attempts in game one or in game two. But credit to Nocturnes where it's due. They played up in game two, and they really told. I don't want to say it was a message sent to Rival, but I think Rival got the message that they have to be. They can't troll these on the world stage. They have to actually put forth an effort, even to beat these international teams, or they're going. They weren't going to go far.
Yeah, I think that's what they learned, really, that you can't roll. And yeah, I don't think there was too much else to really take away from it, right? I think the way that game went was largely down to the picks that Rival went for, like we said.
I do want to relay what the casters said during this set. I think it was this set. It was the difference between these SPL teams and these international teams are not skill so much anymore. It's strategy. And this, I think game two goes to prove it, that the skill was there. Rival tried to be janky and do some stuff weird, and they got mashed in skill with Nocturnes. But in the end, strategy just won out for Rival here. And as the international scene develops more and more of a strategy to combat these NA and EU strategies, I think we start to see some of these international teams get victories at High Res Expo and the Smite World Championships. But right now, it's basically what the caster said. Strategy is the difference.
Yeah, I think that's certainly I think it certainly plays a bigger role than the raw individual skill. Yeah. And yeah, see, I think you said yesterday that this set already made you a bit worried for Rival going into the tournament and going further into the tournament, right? If you're a team like Rival and you're looking to win the World Championships,
and you're one of the favorites to win the World Championships, even if you troll and do these jank picks against an international team, which international teams have only won one game at the Smite World Championships, you have to look dominant. You have to be the game cannot for a minute be in contention or in question that you're going to lose that. And so it was a good, it was a bad message, a bad sign going forward that Rabble wasn't on the top of their game that weekend.
Yeah, and like I said yesterday as well, I didn't take too much out of it just yet because of how dominant the game one was, right? Because they won that game in less than 20 minutes. And that was arguably the most dominant match that we saw that weekend between NA and EU and the international teams. So yeah, that's why I wasn't too worried, obviously, later on, and went a bit different than expected. So, I think that's all there really is to say about the international teams, right? Or do you have any other points you want to make before we move on?
No, that's pretty much covered, is it?
Yeah.
Like I said, turned out exactly how we predicted. Though we were surprised at some of the performances, it did turn out exactly as we predicted it would.
Yeah, and the differences were slight, right? So, yeah, so moving on to the matchups between NA and EU that we obviously saw after that stage of the tournament exclusively, right? We had two of them in the quarterfinals. The first one between Energy and LG, which ended up being a 2-0 in Energy's favor. And there, like I said already yesterday, I thought the game looked fairly even in the first match going into it, right? And going for around 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, I think it was the 12 or 13 minute mark where, okay, Baskin comes off a triple kill, but Adapting responds with a triple kill of his own, and Energy gets the Fire Giant, and then takes the Gold Fury, and then proceeds to take all 6 towers off the map without a fight from LG. Like it went from a 2K gold lead for Energy to a 10K gold lead in less than 3 minutes. And I was sick to my stomach watching that play out, because at some point you just have to take a stand, even if it's against a Fire Giant team and you're down 5 or 6K, because if you continue to let them take everything, then the game's over. And LG never tried to make that stand, and that was what was so disappointing.
Yeah, LG, after that Fire Giant that Energy got, they just ended up giving up all of their towers, right? I don't think a single one had fallen before that point in the game. And once you do that, you're just handing the enemy a massive gold lead that they're going to abuse, right? Especially if they're a good team of the quality of Energy.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. 10K gold lead at like 40 minutes is not 10K gold lead at like 15 minutes. That gap is insurmountable. Like, you've already lost the game at that point.
Yeah, that is almost impossible to come back from. And that's not something that LG was able to do in that game. Despite the best efforts that Baskin really put into it, right? He was an absolute monster in that game. But even he could
not... For the first half, yeah, it was.
Yeah, even he could not do much with a 10K gold deficit, obviously.
And like I said, it was frustrating because as a fan of just of the SPL and not of LG in general, as a fan, you want to see a team actually try to stop the bleeding, to fight over something, to whimper out and just to give up like that. That was probably the most disappointing moment for me all weekend long.
Yeah, I have a different one, but sure. Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? I think LG needed to know that if they gave up all of their tier 2s, they would lose this match. They needed to defend those tier 2s. They didn't. It lost them the game. Maybe if they had defended them, right, the fights under them going in Energy's favor would have lost them the game. But it could have at least turned out differently.
Yeah, we saw later on in the tournament how energy could end up even with the Fire Giant throwing a game. So
Yeah, and
if you decide to defend your tier twos at that point, yeah, you're right. Maybe it goes badly and you end up losing off of that, but at least you tried. All right. I mean, you never know how the fight's going to turn out unless you take it.
yeah, you basically have the option between trying to defend and losing the game if you lose, or not defending and just losing the game. And LG should have known that, and LG should have gone for the former choice, obviously. At least in my armchair analysis opinion. So yeah, game 2 in the set then went really heavily in Energy's favor, right? They got off to a great start. I think they got first blood in the solo lane, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it was in the solo lane.
And at that point, they just snowballed their lead and then were able to quickly build themselves a lead. That wasn't something that LG could really fight into. And that, yeah. Go ahead.
You finish what you're saying.
And that really ended up losing them the game again.
Yeah, that game 2 kind of reminded me a lot of game 3 at DreamHack between Energy and Trifecta. Trifecta having collapsed at the end of game 2 going into game 3 still had a lot of momentum and high hopes that they could actually beat Energy in a best of 3, and Energy took control of the game early and just took it, dominated it from there, and that's exactly what happened in this game against against LG at SWC. It was very much reminiscent of that DreamHack performance against Trifecta.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I was not necessarily expecting out of Energy, right? Out of LG, I mean, because a lot of that loss of Trifecta in that game 3 came down to Trifecta looking really out of it, and them not being as experienced of a team as LG is, right? Because LG has some very seasoned players on there, right? Baskin is nowadays a seasoned player. Mask has been in the jungle for quite some time as well, and Jeff and Barrow obviously have been there since the very beginning of Smite, and that's not a type of team that I expect to crumble when they lose a somewhat close match to an Energy. But that's really what it looked like they did.
Yeah, from the outside looking in, that's exactly what happened. We weren't in comms for that, so we can't be 100% accurate on this, but it did look like after that first blood and after LG or Energy started to widen that gap, that they just looked defeated at that point and they crumbled.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about this match set till we get there, but after the Obey eUnited set, the looks on Obey's face, the players of Obey's face said it all. And if it, to me, that's, looking after that 2-0 sweep from Energy, looking at the faces of LG, pretty much said it all. They were defeated going into that game 2, and they were just ready to, I don't want to say quit, but ready to just get it over with.
Yeah, I think they were very disappointed in themselves, in the performance that they put up, looking at the set in its entirety, right? And I think a lot of people were also disappointed with the performances they had. And yeah, if you are disappointed with yourself, right, to that sort of level, then yeah, you are going to look terrible. Yeah, it's too bad, right? I had some hopes for LG going into the World Championship, but it didn't look like they were able to really do anything that you would have expected from them.
Well, I don't want to say the pressure got to them, but I think the curse of PBM kind of played a little bit into it after that game one. The thought of, oh no, here we go again. NA is not going to beat an EU team. That I don't want to say it was a factor here, but it, you got to consider all possibilities at this point. That maybe that started to creep into LG's mind, and it's why they performed so bad in game two.
Yeah, I think that's also a reason, part of what can play a role in you being sort of mentally out of it after game one. I think moving on to the other set that we saw, obviously, that was one between two EU teams, Obey and Elevate. And there, Obey beat Elevate in very convincing fashion 2-0.
Yeah, this was Elevate's failure to innovate with something new. They tried the same comps that they ran at Super Regionals, the double hunter, triple guardian comp. And in game one, Obey was ready for it. Something about a guardian in the solo and Captain Twig on Osiris really spelt some doom for the Elevate composition, and it was surprising that Elevate didn't bring something new into this set because Obey had 2 months to prepare for Elevate specifically. They knew coming out of Super Regionals, looking at their side of the bracket, that if both teams handled the international teams that they were going to end up playing in the quarterfinals. And so Obey clearly put most of their effort into preparing for the Elevate and whatever Elevate was going to throw at them.
Yeah, that's what Prime said as well in one of the interviews on the red carpet. That's exactly what they had done. And it really showed, not necessarily within this set, right? Within this set, I think you can just see that they prepared, but within the other sets that we saw later on from them as well. And yeah, I was really disappointed with Elevate in this set because they didn't bring anything new, right? I was sort of hyping them up to be this team that is going to be very innovative and whose innovation is going to make them hard to beat. And we saw nothing of that in this quarterfinal. They just got flat out stomped because they tried to run the same thing that they had run for the rest of the split. And obviously, if you give Obey 2 months to prepare, they are going to beat you because they are a team that is smart. And if you give them 2 months, they are going to be smart enough to find a solution to what you're running.
And in game two, the composition in game two wasn't a surprise from them either because we've seen Nox, from Dardes and Cherio with the Athena jungle multiple times throughout the split, so that was nothing new from them either. And Obey had planned for it and obviously knew how to handle it at this point. We both had Elevate winning this set 2-1. We both had it going 3. We did kind of disagree that on how it would turn out if Obey had won. You had said if Obey had won game 1, Elevate could turn around and reverse sweep with the game 3 and 2. I specifically said if Obey won game 1, they were going to sweep at 2-0. Elevate had to win game 1 if they were going to take it. And that's what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was still a different set than what either of us were expecting, just because Elevate didn't bring any innovation. And I think game 2 signifies that failure in a very nice way, right? We were talking, or people were talking at Super Regionals, how you always have to ban Athena against Cherio because he is going to destroy you with it, because it opens up Dardes to playing the Nox in the support role, and it opens up just the entire rest of the draft for Elevate. And guess where comp that Obey beat? Athena Nox.
Yeah, like I said, they clearly had some sort of strategy against it and weren't afraid to pick in, have Elevate pick those two characters because, that's exactly what happened in game 2, and it was not effective whatsoever. I think we underestimated we overestimated Elevate's ability to innovate with something new, and we underestimated Obey's just clear knowledge of the game, and giving them 2 months to prepare for anybody. I think spells doom for that other team.
See, I don't even necessarily agree. I think if you let them prepare for something that you did 2 months ago, then you're not doomed because you can do something new and
Yeah,
bring that
well,
out. And Obey then
the
needs to adjust on the fly, which is going to be much harder, right?
the catalyst is you have to be innovative against
Yeah,
them. And if you're not innovating against them, they're going to beat you. If you keep trying to run the same thing over and over again, something they've had time to prepare for, you're not going to beat them.
yeah, yeah.
Elevate's failure to do that in this set is what ultimately doomed them.
Yeah, the thing is, I'm not willing to necessarily give Obey too much credit for figuring out how to beat this specific comp within 2 months, right? It is still an accomplishment, but it's not a massive one, I'd say.
Well, we both thought they would struggle again like they did at Super Regionals against the Triple Guardian Double Hunter comps. I mean, we both have that on record saying that on our last recording that that's what we thought was they were going to struggle against, and they didn't struggle against it in game one. They beat it pretty handily in game one.
See, I thought they would bring that Elevate would bring something new, and they would struggle against that, not necessarily the Triple Guardian comp. So that's a different thing, right? Again, giving Obey 2 months to prepare is not going to go totally well for you. Because I think one thing that we need to be clear about Elevate, they didn't bring anything new here, right?
No, not at all.
So yeah, then in that case, I wouldn't have expected them to win, right? If I had known that they would bring nothing new, I would have not put my money on Elevate. But in either case, a very dominant set from Obey. Preparation really showed itself, and yeah, Elevate didn't have anything, basically. They're still not a terrible team, of course, right? But if you bring nothing new, then you're not going to win against Obey. I think that's the main takeaway from this set. So, moving on to the next sets that we saw, the ones in the semifinals. The first one we had was that great set between Rival and Energy, which ended up being a 3-2 in Rival's favor.
This was the most entertaining set of the weekend if you watched it.
Yeah,
Game one. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you watched it without any bias, then it was certainly the most entertaining one.
It was the one that was the closest, right? Like this was the obviously going 3-2 in Rival's favor. You know, going all 5 games, that signifies that the set as a whole was pretty close. Game one was a dominant performance by Rival. I think coming into the set, a lot of people looked at that game two against Nocturnes as maybe a red flag, and ultimately it did end up being like a red flag for me. But a lot of the players, or a lot of the people, a lot of the fans thought that after this game one against Energy and how dominant Rival looked, that was no longer a red flag for them, that Rival was just trolling in that game too. But coming into the game two against Energy, where Energy basically flips it on them, and they're the ones that look dominant. It was a lot closer game than it was in game one, but Energy clearly had the momentum for most of that game too. And we talked about Energy's ability to throw with the Fire Giant earlier, and LG, when we thought LG should have taken a fight with Energy even though they had Fire Giant. Game two, towards the tail end of game two, Energy with Fire Giant goes into the dual lane Phoenix, the left side Phoenix, and Rival basically wipes them. defending on their Phoenix, and it goes from there. Rival takes a 2-0 lead.
Yeah, I think what's impressive about this set, this game specifically, was the rival defenses, right? Because they looked good against this Energy roster, right? They won that game with less kills than Energy, which sort of shows you that they were on the back foot, but managed to come back into it. And as you said, the big reason why was because they managed to defend those Phoenixes from the Energy pushes, and managed to actually win fights there and wipe Energy, and that way turn the game around again.
I think the whole set turned on that game 2 stand at the Phoenix against the Fire Giant Energy team. Because if Energy takes that fight and ends up taking the game, if the rest of the set plays out the way it does, Energy wins game 3 and 4, and Rival is not in the finals. Winning that game 2 on that stand at the Phoenix allowed it to go to game 5, where Rival again finally sees that third victory, because Energy almost reversed sweep them and won game 3 and 4.
Yeah.
I do think that was one of the more important fights of the set, that the Phoenix stand and the Phoenix defense, because of what it meant for the rest of the set.
Yeah, obviously if it goes the same way, then yeah, Energy end up winning the set 3-0, right? On the other hand, of course, I think a lot of the reason why Energy came back looking so strong going into games 3 and 4 was because they were just pissed after that second game and after losing that in that fashion, right?
Yeah, they were they were pissed. I mean, it was clear they were pissed because they felt like they should have won that game too, and they were riding that anger off of that, and they really, we've seen what Energy can do when they are determined and they're upset and they want to beat the crap out of you.
Yeah.
And we got a good glimpse of it again here in this set of games 3 and 4, where I don't want to say stomps in favor of Energy, but
They basically were.
it was very clear by 15, 20 minutes into both games who was going, who clearly had the momentum at that point in the game.
Yeah, certainly. And I think what I just want to say, a big part of why Energy plays better when they're angry is because Adapting plays better when he's angry. And I think that really showed as well. Because he was, once again, the big carry going into in games 3 and 4, right?
Yeah, and then he got Fenrir in game 5, and
yeah,
I said it after the Fenrir pick. I thought it was over and Energy was going to win.
Yeah, normally he does extremely well with Fenrir, especially when he's in those sort of high pressure situations, right? But it didn't work out in this game, and I really think Rival's decision to ban him away from the circuit that he had played for the entire rest of the set so far was the key to them really winning the set over Energy.
And the thing about the Adapting and Fenrir pick is we've seen him time and time again when it gets to these best of fives, these late, where it gets into game 5 and they need to win. They don't have the option to lose. He turns to Fenrir over and over again. Season 2 Worlds in the set against LG that went, or Cloud9 at the time, that went all 5 games. He picks Fenrir in game 5. Energy Invitational in season 3 when it goes, against enemy and it goes all 5 games again. He picks Fenrir in game 5. So it was just a pick that he likes to turn to in these situations where it's tied and they need to win or it's over for them. And so
yeah, I believe he actually beat the Cloud9 LG roster twice in game 5s with the Fenrir.
Yeah, I didn't get that far, but yeah, he did end up beating them in season 3 Worlds with that same pick. But it's just a pick he turns to it time and time again when they need that from him. And Fenrir having received buffs prior to Worlds, and him being a valuable card because we saw Scream pick him multiple times this week or during the tournament as well. I just thought it was it was over. Energy was going to be in the finals, and the thing that surprised me was Wolfie's Raijin.
Yeah, well, we learned in the tournament sort of that Raijin is himself an incredibly powerful pick, of course. And I think that game was also one that really showcased that as well. And obviously, giving Uller to vote might also not be the best decision you can make, right? Rival was sort of hesitant on picking him as well within the first phase, right? Energy secured them secured him for themselves multiple times in the set, then went away from it once it didn't really work out. And then when Rival finally went for him as well, he was able to have a big impact for them.
Yeah, Rival. I want to say Raijin. Raijin himself, the God Pick himself, is pretty much what determined the finals between eUnited and Rival.
Yeah, definitely. We get to talk about that later on, but
we know at this point in time how powerful pick Raijin was, and when Wolfie got him in this game 5 against Energy into the Fenrir, into adapting Fenrir, the way he played the god and just making sure that whenever adapting would jump in and try to grab somebody, that he was there to answer with a ton of damage, really decided to be, really ended up being the decided factor. Going into the set, going into the game, I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal, but it turned out to be huge for Rival, and we saw that pick just be big for them later on in the tournament against eUnited as well.
Yeah, I have a question about the drafts actually in Game 5. I expect Rival was first pick, right?
Yes, Fenrir was last pick, so that was the last pick for Energy. So
did they
Rival
first pick Raijin?
I think they did.
See, because if so, that is just a great draft by them as well, right? Because banning the Circuit instead of the Raijin just allows them to go for it. And at that point in time, Energy would have to ban him themselves, leaving open the Odin for Ice, while other picks that work well with the Odin, right? Like the Dashi, which you could, if you put the Odin in solo instead of jungle, or the Ares in support, would still be open. So I really like that draft that they ran there, right? That's just something I wanted to say, yeah, basically. Kind of lost the point there. So, where were we?
I think we're wrapping up Rival versus Energy.
Yeah, I think so as well. We saw Daji, by the way. That was nice. I like Daji, man.
We saw Daji a couple times this weekend, didn't we?
Yeah, but I think we only saw her once out of NA and EU.
We saw Discordia multiple times, too.
Yeah, Disco. She had sort of mixed performances as well.
Who was it that first brought her out? Was it Nas?
I think it might have been, yeah.
I think it was Nas, and he didn't have that great a performance on her. Well, he didn't actually end up winning on her, and then the next time we saw her, I think Pretty Prime brought her out against Elevate, and that's where we start to see her, how powerful she actually was. Because that was a pick that Nanu turned to in game 1 of the finals and really set the tone for the entire set.
Yeah. Speaking of Venenu and of eUnited, of course, they played their set the set as the second one of the day on Saturday, the semifinal. Theirs against Obey, which ended up being a very dominant 3-0 in favor of eUnited. And I'm sure you are happy about that.
Yes, I was. I was very happy with that. I mean, you got to understand going coming off the LG Energy set the day before and how dominant that looked, and it being in everybody's mind that, oh no, this is going to happen again, and NA's not going to win a game, and it's going to be another long year.
Yeah.
To finally have the trend break after an entire season of suffering at the hands of Europe
And me specifically.
and you and Psycho specifically.
Yeah.
That was, that took a big burden off the shoulders of basically every North American fan and player and team out there.
Yeah. And the fashion in which it was done too, right? Because it was a 3-0. Like, that explains most things already. And when you look at how the individual games went, they explain even more of the dominance that eUnited showed in this set specifically.
Yeah, to come in with such question marks about NA versus EU and how it's turned out to be for the entire season, going up against the number two team out of Europe in a set that people thought would be extremely, extremely close, and maybe Obey actually winning the set, for it to be as dominant as it was for eUnited was a big, like I said, big weight off of the shoulders of everybody out there that's related or in some way, shape, or form a part of the NASPL, because it finally broke through that barrier. And the matchup that I want to kind of look to as being the difference maker in this set was the Benji versus the Zelia. Benji versus Zelia, and not these Exelia, but Zelia himself. Talking about him in third person doesn't actually make it better. But yeah, we saw this matchup again in season 2 in the semifinals between Paradigm and Enemy. It turned out much the same fashion. Zelia was not really couldn't fight Benji then, and still couldn't fight Benji in this set, and that's where it kind of got out of control. We discussed for the entire set how important that solo lane pressure was, and how dominant how the game can snowball simply off of where just having that pressure over there. And Benji got off to an early lead, just ran it from there, was 1v4ing between tier 1 and tier 2, while the rest of his team did a Gold Fury, still picked up a kill, and it was like that was a glimpse of what the rest of the set was, how the rest of the set was going to play out if they couldn't get, at least wrestle some sort of control away of that solo lane away from Benji. And Zelia picking Guardians, low pressure Guardians in the solo lane against a player like Benji that just wants to pick these high pressure gods and go at you, really spelt doom for Obey. And with Zelia being so far behind, Twig wasn't that much of a factor. The Osiris jungle, it's good if it's even, or even slightly ahead. If it's behind, he just doesn't have the damage output that you would want from like an assassin instead of a warrior. And so Twig wasn't a factor because Zelia was gone. Zelia was not in it, and that's how it played out. I mean, Pretty Prime did his best, but even that wasn't enough. It was an overall dominating performance from eUnited.
Yeah, Prime was the only one in the set that really looked as somewhat decent out of Obey, right? Obviously, Salia, normally he is able to stall out lanes pretty well, right? Even against solo laners that are considered to be better than him. In this set, and I think against the eUnited in general, that is just not an option you can go for. That's really what has been proven at this World Championship, right? If you give Benji a lead, he is going to just 1v4 you under your own tier 2 tower, while the tier 1's still standing, and he is probably going to get a kill out of it and survive, because it's completely fucking ridiculous.
Correct me if I'm wrong, he did it in all 3 sets that he played in, right?
Well,
I know he did it against... Yeah, 1v4. I know he did it in the Nocturne set, because that was between the mid tier 1 and tier 2, where he's diving into the tier 2. Then he did it against Obey when he was zoning for the Gold Fury. And I think he did it against Rival as well in Game 3.
I think he might have, yeah, because, you know, he is Benji, and that's just what he does, I guess.
It's all, you know, credit to Zelia, he's a good solo laner. He is. You know, he's not terrible at the solo lane like maybe Scary D is at times. But in the matchups against Benji, Benji just has his number, right? Like I said, in Season 2, the Salt Machine versus Zelia, when Benji's name was Salt Machine, that was not a good performance from Zelia there either. And, you know, Salt Machine / Benji dominated and is the reason why Enemy made it to finals in that year. And it just happened again. And you're right. He's good at stalling out lanes against solo laners that tend to grab the pressure. But against a player that's as dominant as Benji is over there, and how dominant he has proven that he can be, I just don't think that kind of playstyle works against a player like Benji.
Yeah, I think he, more than any other solo laner, if he has a lead, he is just amazing at abusing it, right? And amazing at just rotating somewhere and fighting you 1v4 because he can, because he's got a 2-level lead on your entire team. And Salia can't rotate because he needs to defend this lane or his tower's just gonna fall within 5 seconds.
And he's Kakolan, so if he is able to get enough rage on him, he transforms and he's hurting even more, and you have to burn through another health shield.
Yeah, and he just has another kit to kill you with.
Exactly. Kakolan's the perfect Benji gun.
Yeah, yeah. And they tried to bat him out, right? They forced him onto the Erlang Shen for Game 3, but that didn't work either, because you can do a lot of the same stuff with Erlang Shen. Just maybe not as dominantly, but still in massive fashion. And yeah, I think what it also came down to firstly is Scream somehow managing to outfarm Twig, right? And part of it was down to them having solo lane pressure, but part of it was also down to, I feel like, Twig not looking amazing in this set at all. And I think he
kind of struggled on the Osiris jungle, but that was, like I said, warriors are good if they're even or even slightly ahead in the jungle. If they fall behind by a level or two against their opponents, their jungle opponents, and their jungle opponent's assassin, the damage is not going to be there to really make a difference.
Yeah.
And you're really, really just hoping that the game can extend to where you're full build and level 20 and everything else is even, because at that point, when you're behind, that it's on a warrior jungle, it's not good for you.
And then I think the other big issue in the set was that Prime, who we are calling one of the best mids in the world, right, didn't look dominant over Venenu in any sort of way, because Venenu obviously had an amazing tournament individually as well, and it also showed in this set where it didn't really look like Prime was ever able to out-pressure him in any way and then transfer that pressure into other areas of the map.
well, you got to also think what happened in that first part of game one, where Polar Bear Mike wraps around behind them to start the game and picks up the kill. I believe it was on Pretty Prime, or they were able to kill Pretty Prime at the time, and it, after that wraparound, which they only did it in game one. It wasn't the end of the world, but it got Benenu off to a good start because he was able to get, they were able to invade off of that and get the speed buff away from Twig and get the red buff away from them, and Panda Cat then making the early rotation over into the duo lane and allowing Polar Bear Mike to get out of that duo lane and kind of rotate around a little bit more, set the tone for him. And after that, I think Pretty Prime, at least in that game one, was not in a position to be as dominant because the rest of the team was so far behind.
Yeah. I think game one you can definitely excuse him for it, right? Game two and three, I think it's a bit tougher to do. And in game three, he did look good on the Vulcan, right? Just wasn't enough to carry this Obey roster to a victory there. In game two, though, I was still really disappointed with his performance that he showed there. And
I think
yeah.
They talk about the narrative of the set as the set plays along, right? I mean, just from game to game, the narrative of the set, and Obey coming into the set was very hyped, and oh, this is another NA team. We still got somewhat play our game, and we should still be able to beat them. And game one was a dominant performance, and then their mindsets changed in game two, but game two ended up being exactly the same way, and it ended up being a dominant performance. And then, as bad as the start was in game three for them, a lot like the players on LG, it looked, after that's how they got off to a terrible start in game three, it looked like they were mentally beaten.
Yeah, I think that was what played a role as well in the set. And yeah, another thing that I was just disappointed by was they didn't look like they had prepared for what eUnited was going to run in any way, right? Because it's not like eUnited brought in a massive amount of innovation, right? The Bastet is something that we haven't seen a lot, but outside of that, everything could have sort of been expected, or everything else they have run already.
Venenu's Morgan, which got seen a lot of bans in the finals against Rival, it was not something that was played a lot in Europe for the fall split. But, even then, Obey was one of the teams when Morgan was prevalent over there in Europe that really liked to run it. And so you would have thought they would at least had better prepared for it. And it's the Morgan pick from Venenu is what helped them win that. I believe it was game three.
Yeah, games 1 and 3.
It just didn't look like they were prepared for it whatsoever, and it was kind of surprising because the Morgan was such a heavily contested pick in Europe for much of the first two splits of the season.
Yeah, and especially it's still a thing that United likes to run, so you should have prepared for it, right? Everything else is just a bit unreasonable in my opinion. And that made it very clear to me, in addition to the Prime interview that I already talked about, that they really had only prepared for what Elevate was going to bring. And they went into this set sort of unprepared. And that was their big downfall, in my opinion.
And you said it yourself, Elevate, or eUnited didn't really innovate anything. They just came out and did what they did all split long, and that was get pressure in the solo lane and snowball it from there. And when it got late enough, hand it off to Panda Cat and Venenu and let them take it home. It wasn't something that was completely new from eUnited. So Obey should have at least had something prepared for them. And it was not the case whatsoever. It was, you know, like I said, it was not, Morgan was not something new from Benenu. You had plenty of film on it throughout the entire split. Pan Cat again running Hoyi and Hachi Man, and that was nothing new. And Benji on Kakolin, if he gets the choice, he's either going to pick Kakolin or Osiris. So it was nothing new from me United, but Obey just was not ready for it.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why they were not ready, right? I do not. Oh, wait, sorry, I almost sneezed right there. I do not understand why you would put all of your preparation effort into Elevate and none whatsoever into eUnited, because it was very clear from the beginning that if you did end up winning over Elevate, you were going to be facing eUnited. And eUnited, as they've proven already, right? As they have proven already at that point in time by winning NA fairly dominantly themselves, they are not a team you can ignore. And it really seemed like Obey somewhat ignored them within their preparation. And that's not something I understand.
And Hindu Man even warned them, like at the end of Super Regionals, when eUnited had beaten LG in the North American Finals, that Hindu Man himself said this was the two best teams that NA had ended up sending to any international LAN event in almost 2 seasons. And so you knew from that point that neither of these two teams could be ignored. And with eUnited being just so dominant in NA, you knew they couldn't be ignored. You could probably, LG did not, LG still had only lost to Space Station and eUnited, but eUnited had only lost to LG. And so that was something you had to prepare for, because it was very clear that they were a good enough team to come in and beat you and win the entire thing. And it was not, for some reason, Obey. I might let them pass a little bit, because it's not like you can prepare for somebody like Benji, because there's not a lot of solo laners in the world that can create that kind of pressure in the solo lane.
Well, you could at least draft into pressure yourself.
You can at least draft into pressure yourself, but you can't really prepare for somebody like Benji on that solo lane side of the map. So I'll give them a little pass there, but you should still have been looked somewhat, at least a little bit prepared for this set, and they didn't look none whatsoever.
Yeah, and that's why I thought overall they looked really disappointing this tournament as well. Right, so far I think we have 2 EU teams that look disappointing, 1 NA team that looked disappointing, and then we had both Energy and Rival that looked good, and obviously United looked good themselves. And yeah, 2 of those obviously then went on to the finals, like we already said, United and Rival, and ended up facing each other there. So, is there anything else you want to talk about concerning this set between United and Obey, or should we jump into the finals?
Let's jump into the finals.
Yeah, the finals, another interesting set, right? Probably the second most exciting one that we saw in the weekend, apart from the Rival versus Energy one. And it ended up going in United's favor with a 3-1.
We both wanted to see this set. This is the 2 teams we both picked to get there into the finals. Though respectively, we did have different victors, and that was because we were both biased to our regions at that point. But trying to remain unbiased as much as I can here, having watched watched the entire set over again, I think it was closer than it originally appeared. But again, it came down to who got pressure in the solo lane, a lot like we thought it would. to walk you through the matchup between Benji and Deathwalker. I have it scored 2-2, so they came out even though eUnited actually ended up winning the set 3-1. Game 1 went in Benji's favor because Ice Ice picked the Odin and completely, pretty much abandoned Deathwalker in that lane against both Scream and Benji, which gave Benji the lead and Benji was able to do what he wanted to in Game 1. The Odin pick and the multiple invades on the back camps, that, as it got later and later into the game and even the set, because he tried it again in Game 3 and it didn't work out for him. But in the first game, having those multiple invades, you knew eUnited was going to adjust and catch on to that. And he ended up getting picked for First Blood and really struggled from there. Like I said, Benji was able, Scream was able to help Benji wrestle control of Soul Lane and get the pressure they needed from that. Game 2 was much of the same story, but for the different team. This time, Ice Ice Baby put a lot more focus onto the Soul Lane, and Benji fell behind. Deathwalker grabbed the lead, and he was able to put in a dominant performance in Game 2. Game 2 wasn't really that close. It was very much a dominant stop from Rival's point. It got, again, the Fenrir, Scream's Fenrir, into the Raijin, into Wolfie's Raijin. Again, spelt doom for the Fenrir player as much as it did for adapting Fenrir. And yeah, it ended up being, like I said, it ended up being a complete stomp in Rival's favor, and Deathwalker won that game. Game 3, if I'm gonna continue to talk throughout the entire set, Game 3 was again turned into Benji's favor because Ice went with the Circuit and had a chase. From what you know what I was talking about. Both. Yeah.
Basically, Ice Ice went again for the back harpies of the enemy team. Then they ended up chasing him down. So Scream rotated into him, right? Then he ended up trying to get away towards the opponent's base to somehow get to a position where he could safely back. But Scream just went after him, didn't allow him to back. So he had to go back through the jungle of the enemy, where he was caught off by both Venenu and Benji. And he wasted a massive amount of time, fell really far behind due to this, while Scream was still getting farm from other places, right? And basically it just put him completely out of contention in the early game.
It was him being out. Deathwalker struggled against Benji in Game 3.
Yeah, once again, because Scream was able to exert much more pressure than Ice Ice was able to, right?
And that ultimately ends up going in eUnited's favor, and then going into Game 4 with Deathwalker on the Bologna and Benji on the Osiris, and this was the game where Deathwalker solos Benji. Yeah, Deathwalker actually soloed Benji.
Yeah.
But recapping what led up to that fight, and this is me watching specifically Game 4 about 3 or 4 times now. Deathwalker had the Bologna, and it was Erlong Shin Jungle from Ice Ice. They were able to get a kill early onto Benji, who was on Osiris.
Yeah, with the phenols, right?
Yeah, in between Tier 1 and Tier 2, they were able to get a kill onto Benji. The rotation from Venenu and Scream was there. If Venenu had a mana on Zeus, for enough mana for the detonate, they probably answered that kill with the Deathwalker death of their own. but he was just not, the Nanu was out of mana. They Scream couldn't get into a safe position to finish off the kill. Deathwalker was able to stay in lane and get farmed up, get himself a level and a half lead on Benji. And then going into that 1v1 where Deathwalker solos, it was still pretty close. It was a pretty close fight. Both players were relatively low coming, just looking at their health bars on the camera. But it was what was the difference in that fight was Deathwalker landed the Bologna stun on the ultimate. And Benji was not able to get off his ultimate in return. And so it was just good mechanics from Deathwalker that allowed him to get the solo there. Because it all, in my opinion, that solo all came down to that Bologna stun. And if he doesn't hit that stun, it most likely goes in Benji's favor because Benji still has his ult at that point, and they're both 30% health, and neither of them were going. One of them was going to die. It was just depending on who was going to hit their ults first, and both Deathwalker landed the Bologna stun perfectly. So I will give Game 4 to Deathwalker, though United won the matchup in the head-to-head between Benji and Deathwalker. I see it 2-2. So it was a fun set, and I hope we get to see that matchup again because Deathwalker versus Benji lived up to the hype, and it was entertaining.
Yeah. Looking at the entire set, though, I'm fucking pissed about Rival, to be honest with you. And due to multiple reasons again. Right. I feel like they could have won this set fairly easily if they had not made ridiculous, stupid mistakes. And
most of those stupid mistakes were from Ice.
Yeah, let's go into them, okay? Right, so first game, first of all. You watched the Obey set, Rival. You watched that, right? You saw what Benji does when he has a lead. Why do you draft a fucking Amaterasu? Why do you hand him a free lead? Why? You do not do that against Benji. But they did. And he just ran that fucking game and they had no fucking chance at all. Because he was consistently zoning out 4 people and killing 1 or 2. And no chance. See, that's the first thing that made me pissed, okay? It's not a draft you run against United. You can't try to beat this team trying to somehow force the late game. It's not gonna work. Obey proved that one day before. Why are you trying to do the same thing Obey did when they lost 3 games that way? Okay. Second game was good, right? They won second game. Looked very good. Ice, great performance there. Deathwalker, great performance there. Game 3. They didn't have... wouldn't say they had a massive amount of mistakes there, right? That they could have necessarily made better. Just, Ice. If you get caught out, just die. Go back to farming. It's not as bad as if you try to run away, get chased down by Scream, and then die, and lose a bunch of time that you could have spent farming, right? And still give up first blood. But then again, who would expect Scream to just run you down halfway across the map, of course. So that's one way you can excuse it, right? So game 3, they still had an issue, but it wasn't totally inexcusable, right? Game 4, the thing I'm going to talk about is going to be obvious, right? It's going to be that stupid Fire Giant call that they did, where they were trying to bait eUnited into trying to defend the Fire Giant and then fighting them and then winning the fight and then going for Fire Giant, right? At least that's what it looked like, but that's not what they did. They just kept on the Fire Giant until it was too late for them to leash it, so they had to finish it, so Wolfie had to kill it with a Poseidon ult, which he didn't manage to do. Instead, PBM stole it with a fucking Sylvanas one. And so they just handed eUnited a free fire china, a free path back into the game. Because up until that point, they were in the lead, right? And Deathwalker was a fucking monster in that game up until that point. But then handing them a free lead, it's not going to be something you recover from again. Especially if you hand them the Portal Demon right after. And so they should have never forced that FG, or at least they should have never forced it down to the point where they weren't able to leash it anymore. And that's what they did, and it ended up really hurting them, obviously. And that's without saying, like, that's without even going into the fact that they shouldn't have been behind the game. They shouldn't have been behind 2-1 at that point in time, because Game 1 should have never happened in the way it did. Because you should have never drafted Game 1 the way you did. So I'm pissed at Rival. Should have won that set. Didn't, because they're idiots.
Well, again, I'm putting most of the blame for Rival, not on Wolfie, but on Ice. Because even in their set against Energy, the games that they lost, Ice Baby was 3 to 4 levels behind and was never a part of the action, was not even a part of what Rival, could still be a part of it, but wasn't really a threat. And in the 3 games that they had against eUnited as well, where eUnited wins, Ice Baby is somehow 2-3 levels behind Scream and is not a factor in any of the things they want to do. And it wasn't like he was getting a lot, it wasn't like he was massively behind in kills. Like, it was still 2-1-2 against 1-2-4. He was getting out farmed by Scream and adapting prior to that, and it was just this has always been the thing with Ice Baby that I've seen for almost the entire season now. If he's not a factor, if Deathwalker doesn't grab a lead and Ice Baby struggles and is not a factor in these team fights or in anything Rival wants to do, they're going to lose, because you're basically taking 2/3 or 40% of the team away from them, because, like I said, Benji and Deathwalker are even, but Ice Baby's multiple levels behind, and that's not a good thing for anybody. But he's got to focus more on maybe farming or something, because the entire tournament, with the exception of the Nocturne set, Ice Baby just was not a factor in any of the games that they lost.
Yeah,
he was one of the main reasons they lost those games.
Yeah, the only game where he looked good in, right, that they lost was that game 4 against eUnited, honestly. And they obviously threw the game, right? So you expect them to look good based on the first minutes where they hadn't thrown the game yet, basically. And yeah, Ice, he had issues this tournament, certainly. And part of it was that he made some stupid decisions. And yeah, it really hurt Rival as well. And I think Rival in general didn't show up in the same form that we saw from them at Super Regionals, right? I thought they didn't look as good as they did there. They looked like they were making many more mistakes than they did there.
You can't have one player on your team, especially in a role that's as important as jungle. Excuse me. In a role as important as the jungle is, be that far behind on multiple occasions throughout every single one of your games and expect to win. I think up until I said it with the Energy set, I think they should have lost that game too, and Energy should have won the set 3-1. They got up until that point they had gotten lucky, and they were lucky to make it to the finals because Ice Baby just was a bonehead this weekend, and for some reason was that far behind on multiple occasions.
Yeah. I'm really disappointed, to be honest. Like, as I said. Don't have much else to say about the set, honestly. Deathwalker, I think, was better than Benji in the set, right? When they had a lead, when he had a lead as well, Deathwalker, I thought he looked just as good as Benji did, right? Again, pointing to the game 4 specifically, where he basically just tanked a full Sussault and somehow survived and killed someone in the back and then got out, I think. So that's the silly type of stuff that both Deathwalker and Benji seem to be able to do. And obviously, when he had a lead, a proper lead over Benji, he was able to solo him, which is quite an impressive feat, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't think Deathwalker could solo Benji. Like I said, there's a lot of factors leading into that solo, and it was good mechanics on the Bologna stun and sheer dumb luck on the Bologna stun. It was a combination of the two. Because, like I said, if he misses, because you have to land that ultimate, that dead center ultimate to get that stun, and if he misses that by even a little bit, and Benji's not stunned, and he's able to answer with the Lord of the Afterlife ultimate from Osiris, I think the passive of Osiris with the 100% healing reduction from the ultimate on Bologna, I think spells the difference in that fight. But like I said, there's a lot of factors leading into that all credit to Deathwalker, he took advantage of, and it was really outplayed Benji at that point.
Yeah. Something else I want to talk about, just to clarify, right? I'm not blaming Wolfie necessarily for not securing the Fire Giant with that Kraken. That type of stuff can happen. Again, I'm mostly criticizing the call to even go for the Fire Giant and to not leash it early enough in general, right?
You have to leash it before it gets that far down, because, like you said, there reaches a certain point where you can't leash it anymore. You have to finish it, or the other team's just going to pick it up and take it for themselves.
Yeah, and at that point in time, you're basically just rolling a die and hoping it doesn't land on the one. And it did, in this case.
And the same thing happened minutes later with the Portal Demon.
Yeah, so a bit of luck favoring eUnited in that case, right? Overall, they were just the better team this set. If they're going to be the better one, if we get a rematch, that's up for debate, I feel like. And I hope Rival is going to show up stronger the next time they play on LAN, because those are both definitely teams that could perform extremely well in the next LAN that we're going to see them at. And I hope they will, because this matchup, it held what it promised, right? And I'm excited to see it again if we do, in fact, see it again.
Yeah, let's talk about the MVP real quick, though. Let's give the native his credit.
One thing first, right? So, one thing I want to talk about quickly is how I feel like this could be a repeat of what we saw. This season in its entirety is sort of a repeat of what we saw in Season 2. Except with the sides switched, right? Because in Season 2, we had NA dominating the entire season, right? I don't think EU won a set against them in that season. And then we had an EU team, obviously, in Epsilon at the time, which is now Energy, the Energy roster, coming out at Worlds and beating the NA opposition to take the World Championship title away from NA. And yeah, I feel a similar thing happened here, especially because when you look at it, what is the best EU team we had during the entirety of the season?
Season 3 or
Season 4?
Dignitas?
Yes. What happened to them at Super Regionals?
Do you really want to go there again?
They lost. Didn't make it to Worlds. What was the best team? What was the best NA team in Season 2?
Well, it was AFK, actually.
Yeah, it was the AFK and
or Envious at the
roster. Right? What happened to them at Super Regionals?
They lost.
Yeah, didn't make it to Worlds. So it's a very similar story, right? I just find that very interesting. The one difference is we had one wildcard spot in season 2 that was secured by EU, and we had 2 in season 4 that was also secured by EU. So it's not the other way around there. But outside of that, it's very similar.
I wouldn't read too much into that. I think the landscape is as even as it's ever been at this point.
I mean, I'm interested to see going into season 5 if NA is going to be able to forge teams outside of eUnited that are going to compete with the top EU teams, right? Because LG, while they had a disappointing Worlds, I'm not sure if they could have been up to the challenge of challenging the top EU teams, right?
Well, funny you should say that because a lot of roster changes have been already announced.
Yeah, and that's going to make it even more interesting because we're going to get so many rosters looking very different going to season 5.
I think the two exceptions that are going to be made are Rival and eUnited. I think all 5 members of both of those teams end up being on the same team again with each other.
Yeah, and that's perfectly understandable in both cases, and I think for slightly different reasons, right? I think Rival, if they were not Rival and a team that is based almost entirely on team synergy, could look to make roster changes after having a sort of disappointing World Championship. eUnited has no reason to whatsoever because they looked amazing at the World Championship.
Yeah, but outside of that, I think there's a lot of roster changes coming in both regions, even to teams like Dignitas and Energy. Obey's already announced that Emilzy has left them, but we'll get to that in a couple minutes. Let's wrap this up. Let's talk about Venenu real quick, the world's MVP.
Yeah, obviously, he had an amazing tournament.
Obviously, you said he had an amazing tournament. I agree. I do think that if it wasn't for the finals, Benji probably would have been named the MVP going into the finals because of how dominant Benji was in the Obey and Black Dragons set. He was a lot more dominant than Venenu was in either of those sets. Then going in the finals where it was much more of an even matchup between him and Deathwalker, and Venenu shined in the finals. I think that's why he ended up winning finals MVP. I think if it's on the other foot and Benji outshines or whatever, I think Benji takes the MVP in that case. But Venenu had, like you said, an outstanding tournament. He certainly deserves it. But it could be the fact, that Deathwalker was able to do what he did against Benji in finals that kept Benji from winning the MVP of the finals.
Yeah, I think it's up for debate if it should have gone to Benji or Venenu, right? I think my personal one would actually still go to Benji.
Yeah, personally,
Venenu is probably still my second place because, as I said, he had an amazing tournament and was very good throughout the entire thing and had great highs against Rival specifically, right?
Yeah, and if we're going personally to, I believe, up and to the finals, Benji is the MVP, and then after the finals, that's where Venenu wins the MVP because Benji is most certainly the top deciding factor as to why they're in the finals, and they're, the team played amazing throughout the entire weekend, but it was very much Benji's dominant in that solo lane against Kliz and Zelia that got them into the finals in the first place. So personally, it would be Benji, but again, finals, if we're stretching out the entire tournament, we got to look at all the sets and not just the two prior two finals. And so Venenu, Scream struggled at times. Panda Cat was quiet, even though he didn't really struggle. It was the stars of the show were Benji and Venenu just had a better finals. So,
yeah, and I think now going forward, as I said, I'm gonna hold on to that sliver of hope that no other team but the eUnited's gonna be good in season 5, and that it's gonna be the same thing we had in season 3.
The best two. Who's the best? Who's the best you talk about in mid lane?
Huh.
That you wanted that you thought eUnited would pick up the best, and guess who ends up winning the world's MVP?
Okay, listen. When was the last time rookie had a great world championship? Can you name that person?
Oh, well, maybe Vedium in season 2, but they didn't end up winning worlds.
I have a different
Vedium or
name.
Solid Machine.
I was thinking about a different name. It starts with an S and ends with a D.
I'm drawing a blank.
Scary D.
Okay, yeah, I'll give you that.
And remind me again, what has Scary D done since that World Championship?
Yeah, but he didn't actually win the world championship. You do realize there are 3 mid laners in the entire world that can say they've won the Smite World Championship, and one of them now works for Hi-Res.
Yeah. So, point still is, right? I want to see... My point is, basically, I want to see Veneno repeat performances like this, then yeah, I'm gonna stop considering the best better than him. But right now, it's one good performances in a sea of average performances. And I want to see more good performances.
A sea of average performances, yeah, you're right. That's true. But he doesn't have to be the superstar of the team. He's got superstars around him.
Well, do you think United wins this set against Rival if he is not a superstar? If he doesn't have a superstar performance?
No, I don't. But if you're saying the same thing that a lot of people would say in season 2 about adapting in that 5-game set against Cloud9. If he doesn't have a superhero performance, a superstar performance, they don't win that set.
Yeah, well, we're talking about different players here.
But adapting was relatively an unknown going into that first split of season 2. Like he was.
Yeah, the first split, yeah, but not the World Championship, right? Adapting was considered to be the best EU player in the summer split of season 2 and the fall split of season 2.
Yeah, but if he doesn't put a superhero performance in against Cloud9, then they don't win that set either.
Yeah, but the superhero performances are something you expect. You do expect, and you can expect,
and it's too early.
Out of adapting.
Yeah, you can expect it out of adapting, but it's too early to judge on Veneno right now. It's right now they made the right pick of picking up Veneno and not the best, and they won the world championship because of it. And you can't you can't say that they would have done that with the best as their mid laner.
Not necessarily, no. But you can say that if Veneno doesn't repeat his performances, then they're not gonna be as good. And right now, it's his first big LAN, right? Outside of Super Regionals. And the first one where he performed really well at. And right now I have a little reason to expect other massive performances out of him. Because right now, it's an inconsistency in his general form. If he holds that form going into season 5, great, then yeah, United's gonna be a title contender for every LAN they attend. If he doesn't, things can look different. And if he doesn't, then the best will start to look like the better option again. If no one else has picked him up by then.
Well, I don't think you can ever say the best was a better option right now, because they did win a world championship with Veneno, and that the fact that that's never going to change is not up for debate. I think what's up for debate with Veneno right now is whether he's going to turn out to be an adapting-like player or a Scary D-like player. Is he going to continue to have good performances that help his team, or is he going to be a crappy player like Scary D ended up being and really hurting his team later on? The jury is still out. But as for right now, the fact that you can't change that they actually won the championships with Venenu. That's never going to change. So you can't make the argument that the best would have been a better option, because clearly you can't do any better than winning the world championships.
Yeah, well, you could have 3-0'd the finals, but yeah. Theoretically, yeah, of course, right now, Venenu was the better option, because hindsight is 2020. And
literally, not do any better with the best than what they did with Venenu, because even if they still win the worlds with the best as their mid laner, that's as good as it gets, and they did it with Venenu as well. So it does not get any better.
Okay. I mean, again, theoretically, you can always get better.
The scenario could not have ended better.
Yeah, there's no better result than winning the World Championship. That's something we...
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Let's leave this terrible experience for me behind, as I said already. Let's hope EU is better going into Season 5 again. And let's talk about Season 5 and what's going to be happening there. The first big piece of news that came out in the last 2 weeks, obviously we didn't make a podcast last week, so we're covering two weeks of news now, are that the Season 5 orcs were leaked, right? They were originally supposed to be announced at the World Championship itself, and all of them were supposed to be announced. Some have officially been announced now. I'm not sure if our list is still up to date or if anything new has come out. And what's worth saying is that the leaked list of orcs is not necessarily final. There's already been one adjustment to it that has been made, but I'm not expecting any other ones, honestly. And so, without further ado, the orcs that we are most likely going to be seeing in Season 5. For NA, it's going to be eUnited, of course. Why would you kick out the world champion? It's going to be Luminosity, of course. Why would you kick out that team? It's going to be Space Station, which has been officially confirmed already. Trifecta, also officially confirmed already. And Splice, which was officially confirmed at the Smite World Championship, actually. And lastly, we're going to be seeing Counter Logic Gaming, or as it's commonly referred to as CLG. So we're adding another LG team, by the way. We used to have ALG and LG, now we're going to have LG and CLG. Isn't that great? And not confusing at all.
I think that's confusing, and that's kind of going to be hard to get used to. But I think as far as eUnited and Luminosity going, they're not, it's pretty safe bet that they're going to keep their spots, because one's the world champion and the other one's been in the league for 2 years now. Even if eUnited wasn't the world champion, they were previously known as Enemy, and the not the coach, but the
owner is the same one, yeah.
Is the same one. So Clarky has been in with Smite since very early in his lifespan. So eUnited should keep their spot as well. Counter Logic Gaming, CLG, as it stands, I personally know nothing about. I've never heard of them. Splice, I recognize from other esports.
I can tell you something about CLG a bit. They are a bit of a controversial org in other esports. They are one of the sort of big four that are dominant in the NALCS in League of Legends, right? You have TSM, Cloud9, CLG, and the last one that I can't think of right now, because I'm an idiot. Maybe it's just the big three. But anyway, they are very established there and have been established there for a very, very long time.
See, I don't recognize League of Legends as a... I refuse to recognize it as an esport because I don't like that game. I hate it.
Well, see, if you don't like League of Legends, then you can look at CSGO, where CLG also used to have a presence with an NA team. And yeah.
CS:GO and Dota 2 is where I recognize Splice from, and it's the only one of the new organizations other than welcoming back an old EU organizations from the very early days of Smite. That's the only other one I recognize is Splice Gaming. Like I don't know who Counter Logic Gaming is, and the other European one I don't recognize either. So we'll get to that when we when we get to them.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is CLG within CS:GO specifically are a bit known to for a bit of controversy they create due to the contracts they have, right? And specifically due to the I can't think of the word right now. The sum you have to pay if you want to buy a player out of his contract. What's that called?
The buyout fee?
The buyout, yeah, exactly. The buyout fee. Due to those just being extremely high for the players that they have, right? And that's historically been the case, and it's apparently still the case, right? Right now, they have actually given up on their CS:GO team, but they're still under contract. And for the entire team itself, they are demanding, and we're talking about just 3 players here, by the way, not even a full CS:GO team. They are demanding $500,000, and they're not even a good team. And that's a crazy amount of money for a CS:GO team, by the way. For not even a good one.
Yeah, that seems an excessive amount. How long is the typical contracts for CS:GO players, though?
Depends. Like most make yearly contracts. Others actually sign contracts that are going for 2 or even I think 3 years. But it's not common.
Yeah, that's wild. Okay.
And I'm right now I'm not exactly sure how long the CLG players are still going to be under contract to CLG and in CS:GO. Either way, the other orgs, Splice, has had a CS:GO presence, but they've never really been terribly big there either. And obviously Trifecta and Space Station are established Smite orgs that we're seeing. And I do not follow Dota, so I have no idea about that, to be honest.
I don't follow Dota either, but I do recognize the Splice organization from Dota, what little I've watched of it.
Yeah,
I think they also
recognize
have Heroes of the Storm, and I'm not sure what other games they have or teams in, but yeah.
Yeah, another fun fact about Splice, by the way, from CS:GO. In 2016, the first major CS:GO major was MLG Columbus. And in that tournament, Splice didn't actually qualify for the qualifier of the tournament, but they were able to go because another team couldn't go due to visa issues. Because, tournaments in America always have visa issues.
Yeah.
Then, as Splice was invited, they somehow managed to get through the qualifiers with a flawless record. As a terrible team, got into the CS:GO major. Then they bombed out there 2-0, 0-2. So nothing impressive afterwards. Yeah.
Let's across the pond now into Europe.
Yeah. Let's move on to the EU orgs that we're going to be seeing without any distractions from CS:GO. And here, again, it's not final. The first one we're going to be seeing is Obey Alliance. Not sure if it's actually been confirmed just yet, but I think it might have been. The second one's going to be Team Dignitas, obviously. Another very big org, even though they didn't make the World Championship. Third one is going to be Energy Esports. Obviously, Energy, very seasoned org within Smite now. Then we're going to have a new org coming in, which is going to be SK Gaming, which is not technically a new org because it's already been in Smite once before, but that's now been 3 seasons since they've been in Smite. And yeah, that's something that I'm going to be really excited to look forward to them return. The fifth org that we're going to have is going to be Mouse Sports, which is a second German org that's going to be coming in because SK and Mouse Sports are both German orgs. Interesting fun fact, by the way. And the last org was going to be Mythic, but is now going to be Rival. Obviously, that entire drama happened. We're going to talk about it just in a bit. So Rival's gonna be back, which I think is great. And overall, I
Yeah,
really like the orcs that we have in the EU on the EU side.
I will. I will agree with you. I don't know if Obey Alliance has been confirmed yet, but I believe Energy has alluded to it on their Twitter, even though it's not been officially announced yet. I think they've alluded to the fact that they are still in the season 5 Smite scene. Why would you get rid of an organization like Team Dignitas that has been around since the very beginning of Smite? From Lassus and uh, Zapman on the season 0 team for Team Dignitas, the season 4 roster, even as far back season 3 with Frostiak and Shadow Nightmare, and it just Dignitas has been in Smite forever. So why kick them? I think I think it should be fairly easy to determine that Dignitas is in it for the long haul with Smite. So Energy, again, like I said, already pretty much alluded to the fact that they're still in it, even though Hi-Rez hasn't announced anything officially yet. Welcome back to SK Gaming. Mouse Sports, again, is another organization I don't recognize, but welcome if
Yeah,
it's, yeah. And
Mouse
then
Sports is another org that I know primarily from CS:GO again, where they have had a sort of mid-tier European team for most of their tenure in the game, and now have an actually really good European team as well.
the runner-up at Worlds Rival. I'm glad they chose to ultimately bring back Rival instead of Mythic, because Rival has, even if they haven't been in the SPL on the PC side of things, they've been in for a long time on the console side of things, and so it's good to have them officially announced as a SPL organization.
Yeah.
Jumping into the drama, though, if you want to go straight into it.
Yeah, the entire rival mythic drama, obviously, that came due to the leaks that we had, right? We had two big leaks. First one was that the orcs were leaked, and people were looking at them and seeing that this new mythic team that would be in there, an orc that was unknown by a lot of people, right? Because they're also an exclusively CSGO org right now, and within CSGO, they're not even a team that is playing at a really high level, right? So obviously not known by a lot of people, a sort of a streamer org, replacing them, bringing them in instead of rival, that was a controversial decision. And I think the reason a lot of people were taking it that way was because of how similar the orcs were in terms of following, right? And especially how both are relatively small orcs. When you look at SK and when you look at Mouse, which are the other two that are coming in as new orcs into the EU SPL, they are both relatively big orcs with relatively big followings, unlike either Rival or Mythic, right? So the comparison sort of lended itself to be made. And that's what a lot of people did. And so that's how a lot of people took it. Then it came out that not even I'm sure how else how to explain this, honestly. It came out that who was going to be managing the Mythic Smite roster, which would have been Matty Pocket, right? And at that point in time, people were creating controversy, or controversy was created around that fact that Matty Pocket, who's obviously Taco's boyfriend, and Taco is someone who works for Hi-Rez, the company, right, that is giving these orcs the spots in the Season 5 Pro League. People were drawing controversy around that due to it appearing to be favoritism, or due to it appearing to be a conflict of interest that was created. And that was really caused by another leak that happened, which was that DM Brandon leaked a direct message between Matty Pocket and an EU Pro, most likely one on Rival, that had been leaked to him in return. And yeah, that entire thing led to just a massive amount of controversy being created in the Smite community, specifically on Reddit and on Twitter, of course.
Well, I must confess, I didn't put too much effort into this whole drama thing because I didn't think it was that big of a deal. But when you bring up the fact that there was a leaked message, or DM Brandon leaked a message between Matty Pocket and a SPL player that was assumed to be on Team Rival, if it's the law, like it's like international law that a contract, if somebody's under contract, you cannot talk, or you cannot have like Matty Pocket was a representative of Mythic in this situation. Mythic was in breach of contract, or Rival's player was in breach of contract with when he was talking to Matty Pocket about Mythic before his contract was up.
Well, it was Matty that contacted the pro, right? That's the only thing we know for certain. We know nothing about whether the pro even responded in any way. So I don't think it's necessarily a breach of contract from Rival. It's more a breach of contract from Mythic, because they had already signed all the agreements necessary to enter the Pro League, right, in Season 5. And part of that stated that you can only talk to players during the official transfer period, which hadn't yet started, because the message was sent before Worlds and the transfer period started after Worlds.
That's where it becomes tampering. Tampering with another organization's players that are under contract. That's when it becomes tampering.
Yeah, and for that thing, actually, that was also later revealed by DM Brandon, because it was once again leaked to him from a high-res employee. Mythic was fined for that, for breaking that rule, right? And I think it was $10,000 or something like that. And what's unclear is whether it was just Matty who decided to contract the Rival players, even though it was against the rule, or whether it was with Mythic knowing about it, right? Mythic, the org, and Mythic, the CSGO players that own the org. And yeah, what the entire thing led to was that Mythic is leaving the Smite community. In their post, they said that they would be doing it due to the community backlash that they received. And I saw a lot of people there, including myself, explaining that the backlash was not against Mythic specifically, but was against Hi-Res for choosing Mythic over Rival, right? Still, they felt unwelcome, is what they said, and that's what led to them deciding to leave the Pro League instead of participating in it. Sabo?
I mean, what else is there to say? I mean, Rival has been a big, well, not a big part of the community, but it has been a part of the Smite community for a couple of years now. Like I alluded to, they had a presence in the SCL before they had a presence in the SPL. And, Mythic never really had has never had a presence in Smite. So I guess I kind of understand the backlash of you choosing a relatively similar in terms of size organization in Mythic than somebody you have had a working relationship for a better part of 2.5 years now. So I get the backlash there. And if Matty Pocket was involved in any sort or any sort of fashion with this organization, I don't think he's an official I don't think he's an official employee for Hi-Res, is he?
No, he's not.
Well, then I don't think there's a potential conflict of interest there, because Taco hasn't been there long enough to hold any kind of sway over any kind of decision making there. So it wouldn't.
Yeah, certainly not directly, right? The issue that I see, or the potential issue that I see, is that she still has direct access to the people that are making the decision. And that is something that I find a bit controversial, right? If the orc spot then goes to someone that she actively has a relationship with, and where she can sort of indirectly profit from it.
It's a little red tape. I see. I get where you coming from,
Yeah.
but as long as there's no like information exchange there, which is probably a good bet that there would be information exchange there, even if it's accidental pillow talk or something. But yeah, I could see that she's directly benefiting from having Maddie Pocket as a representative of Mythic, and Mythic being in the Pro League. So yeah, I do see it there.
Yeah, and I'm not saying necessarily that she actually had any influence over Mythic getting the spot in favor of Rival, of course. The end result now still is that even though Rival was kind of kicked out of the league by Hi-Res, they have decided not to hold a grudge and instead are taking the spot now that Mythic's gone again, and are going to be returning to the SPL in Season 5. I think...
Assumingly with the same roster. Don't know how that's going to work yet.
Yeah, so far I think they've said that they're going to be sticking together, and now that Rival is back, I think they're likely to stick with them.
I mean, the organization and the roster. I mean, I didn't say, like, the organization can pick up a whole new roster, but the Rival previous roster is more likely to stay together. So we don't know. They haven't confirmed anything yet, but it is fairly likely that both the players and the organizations decide to stick together.
Yeah, I think it's likely, right? Rival could, of course, be looking to join one of the new orcs, or even any of the existing orcs. They could do just a roster swap with one of them. But I think they've really liked being part of Rival, the org, and I don't see a whole lot of reasons for them to suddenly leave them now. But if they do, I'm sure they're gonna have valid reasons for it. And yeah. The only team that I really view as getting sort of shafted by this, though, is wait, seriously, can I think of the name right now? Is Elevate, of course, because they're also not a big org, right? But they're still a bigger one than Rival, and a bigger one than Mythic, and now they're still the ones that are not going to be in the SPL anymore.
You can say the same thing for Noble too. Noble and the NA. They're not huge, but they still okay. Give eUnited credit; they won the World Championships, but it's still Noble has just throughout the gaming community as a whole. Noble has had is a bigger organization and is a lot more games than eUnited is. Noble itself could feel shafted, and that could be. It's the same way that Elevate's in right now. Both have had a presence in Smite for a very long time now. I mean, Elevate going all the way back to Season 2, and Noble is they had a Challenger Cup team and an SCL team at one point. So it's not like Rival has had any more of a longer stint with Hi-Res and Smite than they have. So
yeah, it's a good point as well. I didn't actually think about Noble because I thought they were just a tiny org themselves, but apparently they're bigger than I was thinking.
No, Noble has teams in League of Legends. I'm pretty sure that I know they have teams in PUBG. They have a team in pretty sure Heroes of the Storm. Overwatch doesn't even have organizations. They have like cities and teams and like
well,
much
they
like
have
you would
orgs.
see.
They have orgs. They just have teams that aren't named after the orgs, which is kind of weird.
It is kind of weird because what's the London team name? The London Sound or something, and then
no, Spitfire.
London Spitfire and the Miami, whatever it is, Miami. Yeah,
I only
but
know about the London Spitfire, to be honest.
whatever.
And
But
that's
yeah,
only because... Do you know what a Spitfire is? Quick question.
no.
Okay, it is a fighter plane from World War II that the British used.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the prime fighter planes of that era. So it's a I think that's the only team name of the Overwatch League that I like.
I don't know any of the team names. I just know they're not like organizations. They're like city based, like New York and Miami and London, and isn't there like a Dubai team or whatever? And Los Angeles, I know has a team. It's weird. I don't know, but yeah, they're
Yeah.
not organizations. They have organizations, but they're not named after the organizations. It's just the teams and the cities and stuff. Much like you would see in Major League Baseball or in I guess European football, where it's Manchester City, Manchester United, stuff like that. It's not like it's the team lumberjack or whatever it is you would see in traditional esports.
Yeah. Anyway, skipping the Overwatch League, I think I just wanted to point out that Elevate as an org was kind of getting shafted, and there was very little community backlash against that when you compare it to Rival, and obviously the same is the case with and Noble as well. But yeah, it's understandable why, right? Because Rival is a team that actually was at Worlds and actually did well at Worlds, unlike Elevate. Elevate was there but didn't do well, and Noble wasn't there in the first place. So there's going to be a lot more attention on...
I think also you have to take into effect that Noble's SPL presence really didn't come around until the spring of this year. Well, Elevate has, like I said, in season 2 they had an SPL team. Noble has had a SPL team since the beginning of season 3, so it's longevity wise, as far as Rival being in the SPL, is fairly short as an organization compared to teams like Noble and Elevate.
Yeah. So, either way, I think that about covers the entire controversy without going into any massive detail, right? Because there is a lot you can talk about still around how the entire community reacted to it, but that's going too deeply into the topic, to be honest. So, what else is new? I think the other thing that was announced at the World Championship, of course, was the Season 5 map, right? How it's going to be themed in its entirety, and we've seen sort of first impressions as well. I think PTS is going to be coming up shortly in just a couple of days.
They, according to Stealth's Reddit post this afternoon announcing that patch notes or the 5.1 showcase was going to be postponed due to weather in Atlanta.
Oh,
said that PTS should be up sometime after 3 tomorrow, 3 Atlanta time. I don't know what time it is there. Maybe it's like midnight for you there or something. It should be up later tomorrow.
Should be about 9 p.m., I think.
Yeah, so late tomorrow again is what they're saying.
Yeah.
But the overall thoughts of the map, what do you think?
I think it looks, on the one hand, interesting. On the other hand, I do not like the color scheme all that much, right? It looks a bit weird having it now being purple and the regular Order Sides colors that are like a blue gold thingy, instead of what we used to have with it, with one side being sort of red and the other side being that blue gold color, right? That's something that I think is a bit weird. It's going to take some time for me to get used to it. Overall, I think the map looks interesting. The entire rift through the middle is interesting. There's not much else I have to say about the visuals, honestly.
I want to know how that rift affects the gameplay, because if it's just something you can walk over, that's kind of what's the point of the rift?
Well, it's supposed to look fancy, I guess.
Yeah, but if minions aren't falling into the holes, there's no point of the rift. If it's an invisible wall, you can walk over and just like Indiana Jones and was it the Last Crusade where he was walking across the invisible bridge.
I've never watched an Indiana Jones movie.
It's I think it's the Last Crusade. It might be one of the other ones, but I know it's not the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Okay,
Uh,
that much I'm 100% certain of. But if that rift is just there visually, I think it's a little disappointing because it's a cool map feature and it looks really, really cool. But I want to affect the gameplay some form or the other.
yeah, I was expecting a bit bigger changes, to be honest. And if it's just going to be a visual feature, then yeah, we are still getting surprisingly little changes, or surprisingly few changes to the actual gameplay of the map and the actual layout of the map. I think it being symmetrical, like in the middle of the actual map, is going to be good. But outside of that,
yeah, it's a little bit more even for the gameplay wise, where there was a reason why Order side got in the draft system got 2 picks instead of the one to begin with, because their side of the map was a little bit, uh, the map favored the Order side more than it the Chaos side. So having that symmetrical should kind of be even things out as far as picks and bans go for the pro leagues and stuff.
yeah, and I know that in other MOBAs we have asymmetrical maps, but I still like it being symmetrical a bit more. Right, which side of the map you are on shouldn't impact what you can do at all, honestly. And now it's going to be that way because it's going to be the exact same outside of
Yeah,
visuals.
like I said, that was in ranked and in the pro leagues. That's why you saw Chaos get 2 picks, even though Order got the first pick. It was 1-2-2-1.
Well, that's just how drafting went, right?
That's
You
how
have
drafting
to,
went, but that was for a reason. Like you had to,
yeah,
like
yeah.
they needed to give Chaos side a little bit more of an advantage in the draft because they were at a disadvantage on the map, technically.
Yeah, well, whether it's an advantage is meta dependent, right? But you can't give Order side an advantage by not sort of alternating the draft in the way that you usually do, right? Because normally, if you just give everyone one pick after the other, then Order side's going to have an advantage because they're always going to be picking first. So that has to already kind of be evened out by giving the Chaos side at the second and third pick, and then again giving the Order side the fourth and fifth pick.
They could, they could, what they could do with the draft was 1-1 and then 2-2, and then after the second ban phase, have the Chaos side pick another 2 before Order side gets their final 2, where it's kind of like Order gets 1, then Chaos gets 1, then Order gets 2, and Chaos gets 2. Then the draft, or then the ban phase, and then Chaos gets their second 2 before Order gets their second 2. Like kind of even it out that way.
Yeah, well, it changes how the draft goes theoretically, right? But it's
Yeah,
always going to be meta dependent, and I think right now meta dependent both sides are always fairly even. And with the new map coming and eliminating any as geometry advantages that either side could give you, I think it's going to be even more even. And right now, I don't see a reason to change the draft too much. One thing that I would like to see, though, and I just want to quickly throw that out, I think once we hit 100 gods, I would like to see a fifth ban, and I would like that ban to be in the first banning phase.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Have 3 before you start picking up. Yeah, I like that idea as well. What do you think of the map objective that's going to be replacing Portal Demon? Because though we don't know specifically what it is. They did announce it at HRX that the Portal Demon was no longer going to be there, but instead you were going to get a miniature jungle boss that increased the movement speed for your team for a short period of while, instead of giving you that straight portal out of and into Fire Giant, out of the base and into Fire Giant pit.
I like it because it still can serve a similar purpose, right? Because you can still use it to fulfill the same purpose that the current Portal Demon does in bringing you to Fire Giant quicker or bringing you back to lane quicker. But it has more of an opportunity, more of possibilities attached to it now, because you can freely move in any direction that you want, right? You're not limited by the portal only going to one specific place and essentially being useless if you want to go to the duo side of the map instead. That's something I like.
I think the speed buff or the team-wide speed buff for that, instead of having the portal there, I think that leads to a little bit of maybe priority. Is where before it was pick up the Portal Demon back and then start Fire Giant. I think the priority might be now that we get a Fire Giant first, and then we look to get that speed buff from the whatever it is that they're calling it in the future, and have it that way instead of picking it up first and then going for Fire Giant. I think we see a little bit of a priority change there.
Didn't they announce the name and it was going to be called the Pyromancer?
Was it the Pyromancer?
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, but the map being a little bit, being 20% larger, I think having that instead of the Portal Demon, I think makes a lot of sense, because whereas with the map being smaller and the Portal Demon being just right there, it didn't really make a lot of sense giving everybody a speed buff rather than just the portal. With the map being bigger, though, I think this making that a speed buff kind of thing makes it a lot more understandable and better. But like I said, I do expect a priority change when we start these late game sieges, where it's not going to be, grab the Pyromancer first and then come back for the Fire Giant, because you don't have that portal anymore. We don't know how big of the speed buff it is, but if you get that speed buff first and the other team's in position to maybe wait for you to back and then burn Fire Giant down, then that's not, what's the point of having that Pyromancer buff? So I think the focus is going to shift to Fire Giant before getting that Pyromancer. And the Pyromancer is just going to be like a reward for getting Fire Giant now.
Well, I still think it's going to be relevant before the Fire Giant itself becomes relevant, right? Because now you're going to potentially be able to abuse it to start a push somewhere in the mid-game, right? Because if you're able to get a security objective after a fight, then back and then start pushing on a lane with the speed buff that you're going to have and with the new items that you've bought, I think that can be a difficult thing to hold against, and that's a strategy that I could see teams utilizing. And if they do, that's going to be something that I look forward to in excitement.
I was more alluding to what the late game priority was, where we saw in Season 4 a lot of teams, prioritizing the Portal Demon first and then using that portal to get straight to Fire Giant. I think the priority in the late game is going to shift. Maybe picking up the Pyromancer first is not going to be the go-to call for a lot of Pro League teams. They're going to be looking at that Fire Giant first instead of securing a way to back and then get back to the Fire Giant as quickly as possible. It's going to be straight up burning on the Fire Giant.
Yeah, I could see that happening, definitely. I think I put a bit more emphasis on it having an impact in the early mid game potentially, which is something that I would really look forward to.
I think you're right there that it's going to have an impact in the early game. I'm just thinking, as the game gets later and later and where used to in season 4 we saw teams, like I said, get the portal demon and then get straight back to fire chat. I think it's going to be
Yeah,
a little
yeah, I
bit
get
more
it.
of
I
a
get it.
priority change.
I get it.
Another thing I think is going to change as far as meta goes is we're going to see a lot more assassins in the jungle role now, because with the map being that 20% bigger, like we said, movement getting from one side of the map to the other is going to be critical, and assassins, are pretty much almost all assassins have some sort of movement ability that increases their movement speed, whether it's a leap, a straight out miniature buff to increase a dash, whatever it is. And so warriors and guardians in the jungle aren't going to be as common as we were used to in the pro league. So I think assassins make a return with this larger map because of their movement abilities.
Yeah, I hope so. Think it's. I think I've said multiple times already that assassins are my favorite class, and I would love them to make a comeback, a big comeback in the jungle, of course. Even though we already saw a lot of them thinking about it at the World Championship, right? Especially in the later sets that we saw. So they're not entirely gone right now, but I think they could definitely still be a bit more prevalent, and this new map could easily facilitate that. What I think is going to be interesting about it as well is the rest of the visuals that have already been shown, even though they've been shown quite a while ago already, some of them, right? I'm thinking about the different monsters that we're going to have for the buffs, right? I think it's going to be the Manticore for the rep buff, and the rest escape me right now. Which
I know,
which are going to be
I know,
interesting to look at.
I know the changes to the Titans are pretty cool, even if they don't have a huge effect on the gameplay stage or the gameplay aspect. I think they've pretty much, in their Season 5 Conquest video that they've released already, they've said that the Titans, the Order and the Chaos Titans, are actually going to be Titans from the lore, from the from the Greek lore with the Golden Age of the Titans, and I forgot which Titans they said they were going to be, but they were actually going to be Titans from the lore, and I thought that was pretty cool to add as well.
Yeah, I think one of them is going to be Cronus.
Yeah, the Chaos Sad Kronos. Yeah, you're right. That Kronos in the lore, that's the father of the trifecta, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, and he swallows his children when they are born. His wife hid Zeus from him, and Zeus grew up and ended up overthrowing Kronos and releasing his siblings and throwing Kronos into the pit of Tartarus, which Hades guards, which is a place of below the underworld. So it's the lowest possible realm of hell you can go to in Greek mythology. So
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, looking forward to that as well. Visually, I think a lot of the changes are going to be very interesting. So, yeah. Outside of that, we really have to look to how the actual map itself is going to play, right? Especially with the new sharing, with the sharing now being different, right? The golden XP sharing. Yeah, I'm waiting for people to figure out what the optimal meta is going to be, right? Because there's certainly going to be a meta forming itself. And depending on that, I think we could have a very interesting season on our hands.
I think it's going to be an interesting season until the Pro League starts. If you're a ranked player, like the first part of Season 5 until the Pro League really sets the meta for the middle of the ranked scene, that, platinum, gold, and silver, as I would say, is the middle of the ranked scene, because I don't really say bronze. If you're a bronze player out there, I'm sorry for saying this, but if you're a bronze player, you're not really setting the meta. You're just really following the leader and playing what you want to play. But
I'm pretty sure I could. Well, of course I could get to bronze just by playing with my feet, because there's nothing below bronze.
you don't even have to show up for the game to be getting to bronze. You just have to queue up for qualifying and sit there in base until all the matches are done with.
No, you get banned for that.
You're going to put bronze, and you're going to get put in bronze 5 if that's the case. But hey, but Yeah. Till the Pro League sets the meta for the middle of the ranked scene, which a lot of the middle of the ranked scene kind of looks to the Pro League to get their ideas. As a gold player myself, I can kind of attest to this. Um, there's a lot of Bastet being played right now in gold, and before the worlds, before Scream brought it out worlds, you really only saw it maybe once a week. Now you're seeing it maybe 2 or 3 times a day. So yeah,
Yeah.
until the Pro League sets the meta for the middle of the ranked scene, it's going to be an interesting first couple weeks for ranked.
Yeah, definitely something to look forward to as well. I might actually get back into ranked now. Potentially. No, it's not guaranteed. If I do so, I will definitely stream it though. I can guarantee you that. Anyway, the last topic we want to cover today are going to be the roster changes that have already been announced going into Season 5. Obviously, we're now in the official roster changes period. Oh, man, my coughing is getting worse as this episode's gone on. And the first pretty big one that was actually announced was that Emilsi would be leaving Obey. We already talked about it a little bit. And yeah, as of right now, from what I know, it's unclear where he's gonna go. I think Twig put out a said on his stream that Emilsi wouldn't be going to a different team and would instead actually be taking a break or something, or doing something else. But Emilsi himself, from what I know, has said that he is actually going to be joining a new team. Right now, it's a bit confusing.
Yeah, right now it's a bit confusing. We don't know where he's going to go, but we know that at least the Obey roster is looking for a new support. And first one that comes to my mind is Big Man Tings. I think Big Man Tings has shown he's innovative in the support role, which kind of fits what Obey kind of likes. So it could be that's a good fit there. So we have to continue to watch that. But I think Big Man Tings makes a lot of sense for this Obey roster.
Yeah, I think he's definitely an option you could go for, right? I think the other obvious one would be Dardas. With him, the question is whether he's going to leave Jermaine, right? Because I don't necessarily see Ataraxia getting kicked from Obey. And Dardas and Jermaine, they are known to be a bit of a package deal, right? They're both Frenchmen. They're both the Bruce brothers.
And in that scenario, if you're choosing between Dardes and Big Man Tings, I think Dardes is a little bit more of a wild card factor because of the way his playstyle he likes to do in his playstyle. I think Big Man Tings is you know at least a lot what you're going to get from him when you're playing with him, and Dardes is kind of a, like I said, he's kind of a wild card factor that I don't know if Obey necessarily wants or really likes because they like their traditional supports was much more what Big Man Tings likes to do.
Yeah, on the other hand, I think Dardas is just a better player mechanically, and if I was Obey, and he was open to joining the team, right, I would at least try him out to see if he works within the team synergy, and if he does, then I would probably go for him over Big Man Tings.
Yeah.
But yeah. If the synergy doesn't work out, then yeah, he wouldn't be a good fit, obviously. The other option that could be there, and I'm semi-joking about this, but also semi-serious, maybe they just bring back Frezzy.
It's an option. I mean, he's in a Challenger Cup team for us all I know. Badger's still a free agent, though, ain't he? He coached. Who'd he coach at Worlds? I know they said he was coaching for a team at Worlds. Was it Elevate or was it Energy? It might have been Energy.
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. But yeah, he is a free agent. He hasn't played competitively, or he hasn't played on an SPL team for even longer than Frezzy hasn't, right? So I think he's even more of a wild card, to be honest. But yeah, Batcha, in the past, he's been a good support. Maybe he does make a comeback. It's not out of the realm of possibility, certainly.
Continuing on with the EU roster changes, Elevate. Well, the Elevate roster has announced a couple changes themselves. Death Panther is no longer on the team for reasons that I don't know. I don't think anybody has said any reasons, but we know Death Panther is not on the team, and No Numbers has reached the age in Israel that requires military service, so he has to leave the team himself. So
Yeah, it's a bit of a sad story, right? That he is not going to be able to play anymore in Season 5, at least not competitively. And Death Panther, him being kicked out, I think it's an understandable move, right? If you look towards what Season 5 changes are going to be bringing, because most likely we're not going to be getting Hunter mids anymore. I think Harris is going to steer away from that fairly heavily, right? And if they do that, then Death Panther's stock kind of falls, because that's really his one niche where he is a good mid laner within it, right? He was never an impressive mid laner in the summer split where he was on that burrito roster, yeah. And I think if you take out the hunters out of mid, then he falls back down to a similar level to that, and at that point in time, there are probably better options available in EU that you can grab instead of him.
yeah, he's definitely not the mid laner for trifecta kind of player that thrives in both situations. What's his name? Heroin. Yeah, he's definitely not the heroin type that he can excel on both the hunters and the mages. Death Panther is notoriously known to struggle on these mages where it's not, if his hunters aren't in the meta, he's not really a great option at mid lane like Heroin is.
Yeah. And see, at that point in time, you might just bring back Nilissa, because why not? Or you can look towards other talent that is available, of course. And yeah, for No Numbers, I'm not sure who I would pick up to replace him, right? Because I don't know a lot of other solo laners that are going to be free agents that are going to be at a good level within Europe specifically. But maybe there are some gems out there, right, that are looking to be found.
Maybe there are. Ducky could be a
oh, I have an idea. I have an idea, okay? I know a guy who's a good solo laner. And you just bring him in. No, you just bring him in. Totally 5-5. You heard it here first. Totally 5-5 to Elevate. Not Elevate, but whatever orc's going to be picking up the Elevate roster.
On Confrey. There we go.
No, it's going to be totally 5-5. You heard it here first.
Is that Anatoly's Smurf account?
No, it's totally 5-5. You're going to be surprised, man. Promise you.
As far as I know, that's all of the European roster changes.
Yeah, looks like it.
Going to across the pond to North America, the first one that came up was announced. The big one that came up was announced last night. Homie Faye has left Space Station. I believe on his own accord, though can't confirm or deny that. He announced it last night. He said he's no longer on Space Station, but he would like to thank the players and the organization for the time that they gave him. So Homie Faye is no longer on Space Station, which I think, if you count in the other roster changes that took place, is very interesting because nobody outside of eUnited has a jungler right now in North America. Yeah, so Homie Faye's off Space Station. Skeledon, Wubbin, and Wowie have all left Noble, or what the organization formerly known as Noble was. So Skeledon, another jungle free agent. Mask had announced that he was off of LG and didn't know if he was going to continue to play, but he did announce this afternoon or earlier today that he did have a new team, but there was no information on the team. So LG is without a jungler right now. Sino Shore doesn't. We knew, like, Sinosure doesn't have a team anymore because Aurora, Kiki, and Sinosure all left Trifecta, and Mirage was not going to be the permanent fixture at jungle for Pain to Beyond's team. So the jungle position right now is wide open outside of Scream on eUnited in North America. But
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, right? Because if you're LG specifically, you can sort of look towards who exactly you're going to be getting, because they have a lot of options now, and I think a lot of options that could work well within the team. Yeah.
yeah, definitely Homie Face an option for LG. If you're looking at LG being the top of North America outside of the eUnited, they're certainly going to want to get their pick of the jungle. Homie Face an option there. We have to include Andy in that conversation because Andy, I don't know if you've seen it, but there have been leaked photos of games online of Andy playing with all of the current LG roster, including Aquarius. As a Ganesh, I don't know. It was probably just a troll game but everybody on LG had Ganesh, and adapting was in that, or not adapting, but Andy was playing Ganesh with everybody else. So it was, there's maybe a leak, maybe it was nothing, but hey, it's
Yeah, well, I would say Andy to LG confirmed.
yeah. It's, considering that last year or before season 4. Andy tried to say he was not transferring to mid lane, but every time he was playing on the stream, it was Homie Faye in the jungle and him on the mid lane. And so it was, Andy's not good at hiding stuff for some reason. So Andy to LG is confirmed. You've heard it here first.
Definitely, yeah. But yeah, I think that's a possibility, right? Him moving back to the jungle is something that I've wanted for a decent amount of time now already.
For the entire season, yeah.
Yeah, because he used to be an amazing jungler, and I'm sure if he went back to it within like a couple of splits, he would find that form again and be one of the best junglers again.
I don't think it's a couple of splits. I think it's a matter of weeks before he finds this form again, because you're talking about and Anister. Him and adapting are, the junglers. When you think about the history of Smite, the first two that come to mind are Anister and adapting. So I don't think it would take him that long. I would think it's just a matter of weeks, maybe 1 week, and then he's back into the groove of things. But
yeah, maybe. I was thinking for more getting back to the top level of play that's possible for him, right? And I think for that he would need a bit more time. But yeah, he would certainly be a decent jungler, I'd say, right off the bat, basically. And
the other roster changes, the Wowie, Wubbin, and Skeledon being off of the Noble roster, and whatever the organization decides to pick them up. But Niruma joins. Final K and Moswell is the only two that are confirmed on that roster. I don't even know if Moswell is confirmed to be on that roster anymore, but Niruma and Final K are there. That it could turn out that that's Mass' new team. I don't know, but like as far as any rosters have been announced, Niruma and Final K are playing together for next season.
Yeah, and that is not a terrible roster, right?
It's not to begin with. Not with somebody like Niruma was underrated as far as supports go, because the team struggled. It wasn't anything you could point your finger at Niruma doing terribly bad. He was actually one of the better supports in North America if you look at the entirety of how he played. It's just the team was bad. And so him joining Final K, which I've already said Final K is probably the second best solo laner in North America behind Benji. So it's a pretty good start to a roster, even if Moswell is not on it. So we got to see where that rest of that, or how the rest of that roster fills out. Should be fun to watch.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing is how both Noble, or as you said, whatever org they're going to be going to, and Trifecta are looking to make massive structural changes to the teams, right? Because right now Trifecta looks like they're just holding on to
Herwin and Snoopy.
Herwin and Snoopy, which are arguably the two best players on that team. I'd say. Maybe Aurora, you can make a case for him being one of them as well. And the same is really the case for Noble, right? Fino K is the best player on that team that is available. And restructuring the team around them makes a lot of sense, in my opinion. And I'm excited to see what they're going to be coming up with.
You got a lot of possibilities right now with the free agency, how it works. I don't know. I know Cooper announced that High Res Expo that is going to be there was going to be a free agency period, so there's a lot of combinations out there that could work. For me, I really want to see Aurora and Kiki at least stay together because I thought that was an interesting combination, and it was fun to watch while it lasted. Um, Sino Shore has a lot of options. I think Sino Shore has definitely proven himself to be one of the top 4 or 5 in North America as far as jungles go. I know he struggled at the towards the end of the fall split, but in the summer he was definitely top 2 in the summer. Definitely top 2 in North American for the spring as well. So I think Sino Shore is more improving that he can play at a SPL type or SPL caliber.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think he should have little trouble finding another team, right? It's not entirely sure whether his performance or how much of his performance relied on being on that trifecta team that was running a bit of different style of picks, right, than most other teams were. Thinking about Kiki and the different types of solos that he is able to play and the more supportive solos that he is able to play, for instance. But yeah, he had good performances.
Here's an interesting roster I can throw out right now, just off the top of my head, out of free agents I can think of. Vedium and Aurora in a duo lane, putting the best in the mid lane, and putting Sinosaur and Kiki in solo and jungle.
Yeah, that sounds like a decent roster.
Sounds like a good roster, if you ask me.
Yeah. Or you could replace Kiki with Divios.
Yeah, Kiki with Divios. Yeah, that's true.
Because Divios should come back, honestly.
But yeah,
if you're gonna go there, you can replace the best with the Boosh.
Let's not go that far back. Jesus.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah, you got a lot of recognizable names out there that are free agents right now. Wowie, Woven, Skeleton, Aurora, Kiki, Sinosaur, Divios, Walrus is another one out there. Homie Faye, Betium. Who else? I don't know what's been announced, but like Payne Nivion and Dare to Care, or not Dare to Care, but Day to Remember. Like they're also, even Mando Warrior is still out there on the solo lane side of things. But
yeah, and maybe Grave is gonna make a comeback as well.
Yeah, Grave's another one. There's a lot of possibilities out there. A Weekend and Cyclone Spin, like can't forget about those too.
Yeah,
Oceans, though I want to see him in the jungle or in the hunter role and not in the mid lane.
Yeah, definitely. And did you say Matt Yankee already?
Yeah, I didn't want to leave off Matt Yankee. You beat me to the punch. So.
Yeah. There's a ton of options. Yeah, certainly. And excited to see what they're going to be doing, especially at NA side, right? There's a lot more changes announced so far on the NA side than on the EU side. And it makes sense because NA is right now, outside of eUnited, still a weaker region, right? So you would expect them to make more changes going into Season 5 because they have less things together that are already working.
Yeah, and the only change for Luminosity that's been announced has been Mass, so there's stability at the top of North America as far as the top 2 teams go, as far as rosters have been announced.
Yeah, and of course the EU side could still be a firework, right? Because they could be looking to split up and send people different directions, right? And potentially you could have other teams falling apart, like an Energy, where now that they've not found the necessary success at the World Championship, they could be looking for different places to go to, right?
Yeah, I think Obey for certain it's whether they're definitely looking for new support. We could see other roster changes as far as Zelia goes in the solo lane. We don't know if that's going to be a thing going forward, if that was a thing for just for the fall split only. Dignitas hasn't made any announcements yet as far as roster changes go, but they could be. I mean, after the disappointing end of their season, they could be looking to make changes. You alluded to it, Energy not being three-time world champions now, could play a factor into roster changes there. It may be more than just Demi going forward that's off the team. I think adapting's pretty safe. If he chooses to stay with the team, adapting's pretty safe. Emilito's probably another one that's pretty safe, and I think everybody else could be potentially looking as possible replacements for their teams.
I think
so I don't.
A move that I could see coming would be kicking Raffer and instead getting a Milsey on the team, for instance.
See, I didn't want to bring that up because that was a Reddit thing, but you brought it up anyway.
Yeah, well, it's a fairly obvious move, right, that you could make.
It makes a lot of sense, yeah.
And it's
Fairly
honestly,
obvious.
like, it's one of the few teams that you could realistically see a Milsey leaving Obey for, right? Energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a move that could be coming up, and others could follow. We don't know for sure yet.
We just know there's a lot more dominoes to fall.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, I think that about wraps up everything that we want to say today, right?
Yeah, I'm done.
I mean, it's already a long episode anyway. So, thank you all for watching this episode of the Tuesday Night Smite, or I guess it's now the Wednesday Night Smite podcast, for today only and never again. I just want to apologize for all the cuffing that I did during this episode, but it's been really fucking rough. Like, honestly, trying to hold it back, and it's been impossible. And it's been getting worse because I haven't talked this much in days, in weeks even. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Thank you, Sabo, here, for being with me. If you like this episode, then leave us a like on whatever platform you were watching it on, YouTube, SoundCloud, etc. If someone uploaded it somewhere without our knowledge. I don't know. And if you want to see more episodes, you can follow us on SoundCloud. You can follow us on Twitter. You can subscribe to us on YouTube to be notified when new episodes come out. And with all that said, good night. Good Smite.